So this week, again, you do have we have a assignment, okay? The assignment is fairly straightforward. You're going to color the following organs. Don't forget to color. The little circles, that's where you put the color that whatever you're coloring it. Then you answer some questions. Again, you're going to be labeling. We got a tooth to label. And then we have the 3 articles to read. So it's fairly straightforward, okay? You're going to keep a copy of your answers because next week in lab, okay, or I'll probably be able to hand this back to you, except maybe the Tuesday people, we'll see, okay? You were going to get a consensus among your lab groups of what everybody thinks, okay? So you're going to talk to your lab partners because there really isn't a right or wrong answer to this, right? Okay? If you think we can prevent somebody's disease, then it's a good thing. But if you're worried about this information getting out, it's not such a good thing. Okay? So there's pros and cons to everything, especially when you're talking about ethics in medicine. Okay? What is the right thing to do? Do we insist that everybody does this? Okay? If it's a population situation, then there's a different story, okay? But if it's an individual basis, okay, then, you know, people should have an input on what they have to do. And so that's what I'm asking you for your input, okay? So if you don't agree with your lab partners, that's fine, okay? Let's just see what, if they can convince you or you can convince them. Or maybe everybody agrees on the same thing, okay? We also have a urinary lab, okay? And so in the urinary lab, we are going to have a few things. Again, you're going to need to know where the kidneys are, both in the plastic models, and then we have that actual flat with the kidney on it, which I used actually in the last lab exam to highlight the adrenal gland, okay? And then you need to understand what the wastes are, nitrogenous wastes being the worst of the group, because that makes ammonia, okay? It's the most toxic of all the byproducts, but we also have uric acid and different things, especially with protein breakdown with the nitrogen source, and then nucleic acid breakdown, you get uric acid, and then we also have the creatinine, okay? That's nucleic acid breakdown. And then we have the blood urea nitrogen levels. Okay, what exactly does that mean? Okay, and again, know where your kidneys are. Okay, we've got the fat around the kidneys. So we need to know all of these organs for the lab exam and for the lab up. Okay, we do have a plastic model of a bladder. We have models of the kidneys, and you already saw all the blood vessels. Okay, so our kidneys. Okay, you're going to be dissecting a kidney, a sheep kidney. They're really small, all right? And sometimes they look more like marbles than they do kidneys, but hopefully you get a good set of them, okay? But you're going to cut them longitudinally like you did the heart, so you can open them up and then try to see the different parts, okay? If it is shiny, okay, then you do have a covering to it, and you'll take your little really sharp pokey thing and try to pick up your cover on it, okay? But there are connective tissue layers, as we know, okay? You have the capsule, again, and then you need to know the cortex versus the medulla. What does cortex mean? What does medulla mean?
Inside, medium.
Okay, those are terms to identify places in the structure. Those are not tissues. All right. You need to identify pyramids, the renal papilla, if you can see them. Again, the pyramid is the pyramid plus the cortex is the kidney lobe. Okay, and with the sheep kidneys, you really have to kind of bend them backwards to get them to pop up so you can actually see it. So once you cut it longitudinally, then take it and kind of bend it backwards. Okay, don't be afraid to hurt it. Okay, bend it backwards and get the pieces to pop up so you can actually see. So the cortex, the medulla, the pyramids to look at. And then we need to know the minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis. Make sure you look at the plastic model, because this is the kind of thing that's gonna be passed on the next lab exam. Okay? And then, so we have the patella, which is the top of the pyramid. Sinuses, I don't usually worry about, but the minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis, and ureter. You need to know those, okay? And then the nephrons, you need to know the different parts of the nephron. We have the renal corpuscle, the glomerulus, the Bowman's capsule, or the renal capsule, okay? The afferents and the efferent arteriole, why are they different sizes?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. You need to know the different pieces of the nephron, because this makes a great lab exam question. Point to something, what is this? Okay, what is its primary function? Okay, we've got the PCT, most absorption, reabsorption. We've got the nephron loop, so the loop of Henle, and then we've got the DCT. Okay, and then the collecting duct. So you need to know kind of what their major functions are. Okay, and thin segments versus thin versus thick segments of the nephron loop. We've got two different types of nephrons: the ones that stay in the cortex, and then the ones that go all the way down through the medulla. The medulla are the ones that set up the salt gradient. Okay, the distal, the collecting duct. Okay, and that salt gradient, which is very important because it takes out water and concentrates the urine in that collecting duct. So you have in this picture, you have the salt gradient, I know, there it is, going from, 1200 back up to 300. So this would be kind of up in your cortex, okay? And the nephrons that have just the shorter loops that stay up here don't really have any input into that salt gradient establishment, okay? And then again, I talked about this. We have this on that flat that I had used for the last lab exam, okay? We have this little guy up here, okay? Macula densa, you need to know the different cells, the granular cells. You need to be able to identify these guys. It makes another great lab exam question, okay? And again, the nephron loop, the nephron. Okay, the way the urine is produced and flows through all the way down to the bladder and then out the urethra. Okay, this is what the kidney looks like under the microscope. I do not ask you in this lab to draw it because we've got other things that we're doing. Okay, but you need to be able to identify this. Okay, so make sure you look at it. And the way you do this is the glomerulus, okay? There's a Bowman's capsule. And this is really a thin layer. Remember the podocytes are making this membrane here, okay? And the way you see this is fairly easy to identify. All these other things here, you've got some longitudinal tubules and you've got the cross-sectional tubules. I don't ask you which tubule is which tubule, okay? But if you look at this under the microscope, what stands out?
The capsules.
All the little balls, right? All the little balls, okay? All the little balls of yarn, that really stands out when you're looking at the histology. So if I were to put a kidney under the microscope for the next lab exam, okay, look for the balls, okay? What other organ has this kind of makeup? The zero. Okay, so you should be able to look at this and go, oh, it's a kidney. Okay, so make sure you look at these labs. And then we are going to be doing the urinalysis. Okay, we'll go through that in a minute. Again, diabetes. There are 4 types of diabetes. All of these are diabetes mellitus, 1, 2, and gestational. And then diabetes insipidus. This does not have anything to do with glucose, because it's the antidiuretic hormone. lack of secretion, hyposecretion, okay? And then we have some renal disorders that we went through that you're going to be, talking about in the, lab. We also have the bladder, okay, female, male. We have the prostate issue, remember that? Why is a growing prostate an important issue for an aging male? What's the potential? Compresses the ureter, and then, or the urethra, and then what happens? No urine flow. Okay? This will grow in men. Hopefully it's benign growth. Okay, hopefully it's benign hyperplasia. But it may not be. That's something that you need to keep an eye on. Even with a benign growth, this can compress the urethra. Okay, and that's an issue. On the other hand, what is the problem here? Too short. Okay? And a lot of bacteria can get up in here. So females tend to have more UTIs. Okay? There's a long tube here to get all the way up to the bladder. Okay? And remember, we have two sphincters. What's this one called? Internal. What's it around? It's around the urethra, the urethral sphincter. And then we have an external around the urethra, the external urethral sphincter. Don't tell me it's an external sphincter because there's lots of sphincters. Okay, you need to name them. Okay, internal urethral, it's around the urethra. Internal, external. Okay, we do have a bladder that looks like this in the lab. Okay, we only have one, so make sure you look at it. Okay, what is the muscle of the urinary bladder called? The detrusor. It's given its own name because it is what kind of muscle? Tissue? Smooth muscle in multiple different directions. So it gets its own name, and it's called the detrusor. The trigon is that triangular place in where the ureters come in and the urethra goes out. Okay? Make sure you can identify these things on, and then your internal and your external urethral sphincter. Okay? So that is the lab that we have going on this week. Okay? Plus the kidney. Okay? Pull up the lab. Yes. Okay? So you've got, remember, I did not ask you to draw, but the histology for that kidney is here. Okay? Draw it if you want to, but you don't have to turn it in. Okay? Because we have a lot of other stuff. But make sure you look at those slides so you know if I put that on a lab exam, what it is. Okay? Then we have our kidney dissection. Okay? And then we have a urine node. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the urinalysis that we're not going to do, like looking at the urine under the microscope. Testing of urine strips is what we are going to do. So there's all kinds of things before here that describes the urinalysis, okay? And we will have, again, these are fake urine samples. We will have them on the bench top, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're gonna do the kidney dissection first, and then we'll do the urinalysis, and this is with your lab partners, okay? Some of these do have some acid in them, so you may want to use gloves. It's not a lot of acid, so it usually doesn't matter, but you might want to use gloves if you're sensitive to acid. Okay, so you're going to be looking at color. We know what it's supposed to look like. We'll do the pH. The clarity means, are there floaters? Yes, shake it a little bit. Are there anything? Okay, it should be clear. Okay, it should not be cloudy. And then you're going to look for primarily glucose, proteins, and ketones in your samples. And then we have 4 patients, and here are your patient A is such and such. You're going to write out the symptoms. You're going to give us a diagnosis and a treatment. Okay, and you're going to look at this based on the urinalysis. Okay, and then here you've got your renal disorders and urinary tract infections. We will go over the disorders at the end of lab, so don't panic. Okay, those are the ones that we went over in lecture. Okay, so we will go over these again. Okay, and then here is a This is actually from the Cleveland Clinic. This is a card that some physicians will put in their pockets, and this is just gives you the color of your, okay, and what they can look for. Look, purple made the cut. Yay. All right, so that is the lab for tomorrow and Tuesday. Any questions with that? Okay. All right, so we are on, up and onward. We're onward to the digestive tract. Okay? And this again, we know the nutrients, obviously, very important. We take in something complex like a cheeseburger, we need to break it down into proteins and fats because that's what the body can use. Okay, the body can't use the cheeseburger. Okay, it has to use the pieces. So the digestive tract really is a disassembly line. It's open at both ends of the disassembly line. Okay, your mouth and your other end. Okay? If you want to study the digestive tract, that's your gastroenterology. Okay? So here is a quick animation of the digestive tract.
Sigrid releases immediately and blocks acid that causes heartburn for 24 hours. Feel the difference.
Join Empowered for access to a community of teachers, activity packs, and microgrids, all for free all year long.
Digestion begins the moment you take a bite. Food.
Uh-oh. Now we're gonna go through the commercials again.
Best part about Russell Stover sugar-free candies. No sugar, great
Oh,
taste,
different commercial.
guaranteed.
And a different commercial.
Digestion begins the moment you take a bite. Food is shuttled from the mouth to the stomach via the esophagus, a ride that will take about 5 to 8 seconds. The peristalsis is the involuntary muscular force that propels food through the digestive tract. It almost looks like an ocean wave pushing food from one organ to the next. When food reaches the end of your esophagus, a ring-like muscle called the lower esophageal sphincter relaxes and lets the food pass into your stomach. Weakness of the sphincter causes a backflux of stomach acid and heartburn. The stomach is where the real action begins. Digestive juices and enzymes break down the food that you swallowed. This helps make nutrients available for absorption later in the small intestine. The digestive juices are powerful hydrochloric acids that kill pathogens in food and gives the stomach the low pH digestive enzymes need.
It's actually better than that.
This acid could literally dissolve most of the other organs in your body. Luckily, your stomach contains a thick mucus lining. However, when there's too much acid in the stomach, it can eat away the inner surface of the stomach, causing an ulcer. The process of digestion takes longer for some types of food that...
I also have to interject here because, number one, the stomach acid, the stomach pH is lower than that, but ulcers, we now know there's a major bacteria, and we'll talk about that later in the lecture, that actually causes the ulcers. It's not just the fat, it's the bacteria has gotten a hold, it has eaten away the mucus, so now the acid can create a hole. Okay, so they said it was just the acid. It's not. It's now considered a bacteria that initiates the whole problem, and that's why we give people antibiotics when you think you have an ulcer, which sounds weird, but that's what happens.
There's simple carbohydrates, such as an energy drink, break down the fastest. This explains why many recommend energy drinks for a quick energy boost. Proteins take longer to digest, and fats take the longest time of all. The stomach slowly empties its contents into your small intestine. The muscles of the small intestine mix food with digestive juices from the pancreas, liver, and intestine, and push the mixture forward for further digestion. The walls of the small intestine are covered by tiny finger-like projections called villi. These projections increase the surface area through which nutrients can be absorbed into your bloodstream. As peristalsis continues, the waste products of the digestive process move into the large intestine. The large intestine is named for the diameter of the cavity, not for its length. It is actually much shorter than the small intestine. Its role is to absorb any extra water from the digested material before it is finally excreted. If food passes through too quickly, too little water is absorbed, and you might have diarrhea. If it passes too slowly, your body absorbs too much water, and you may become constipated. It takes about 30 hours for food to move through the large intestine. All in all, the whole process, from the time you swallow food to the time it leaves your body as feces, takes about 2 to 4 days. Solid waste is characteristically brown and stinky. Do you know what causes its odor? If you guessed that bacteria are involved, you'd be right. Microbes that reside in the large intestine make a meal of the leftovers from the small intestine. The smell associated with stool comes from the gases released by bacteria. The large intestine then empties its contents into the rectum. Its job is to let you know that there is a stool to be evacuated, and to hold the stool until the evacuation happens. Thank you for watching this video.
All right, there's also, again, obviously, a crash course associated with this. There's a couple parts to it, okay? We don't have time to listen to this one, but it's a good video, okay? So we've got a couple different types of digestion. We have mechanical. This is the physical breakdown of the food into small pieces, okay? The grinding, using the grinding and the cutting of the teeth, the churning in the stomach, in the small intestine, and this whole mechanical part is to make more surface area so that you can have more surface area for the action of those digestive enzymes. The chemical digestion, that is the enzymes, okay? And we'll talk about the different enzymes we've got them produced in the salivary gland, stomach, pancreas, and small intestine. These enzymes are proteins, and so you will see that the body protects itself by changing the pH of how this food is continuing down this path. The pH in your mouth is different than the pH in your stomach, which is different than the pH in your small intestine. So the enzymes that are working in your mouth get turned off in the stomach. We make new ones in the stomach. They get turned off in the small intestine. We make new ones for the small intestine, okay? Because these enzymes, let's say we have a protease. It's going to break down protein. Do you think it cares if it's yours or the cheeseburger's protein? No. So we really have to micromanage what happens with these enzymes. Because if they get out from where they're supposed to be, they're just going to destroy your proteins or your carbohydrates or your nucleic acids, okay? We don't want that to happen. Those are very serious situations, okay? So we've got stages of digestion, ingestion. This is the intake, ingestion. Okay, digestion is considered the breakdown of the food into usable sources such as the amino acids, the proteins, the monosaccharides. Then we're going to uptake it, absorption. This occurs in the small intestine. Okay, we're going to take it up into the blood, or in the case of fats, we've got those lacteals in the intestinal tract that picks up the fats and takes it into the lymph system. And then compaction. This is what occurs in the large intestine. The large intestine primarily has two functions. The bacteria that's there, because not only do they help digest your food, but they make things that we can't make ourselves. They make some vitamins for us, okay? And taking up of water, okay? That is your large intestine, absorption of water. And then elimination, defecation, okay? So again, we have a big tube, muscular tube, running from the mouth to the anus, and it goes through, obviously, some of the respiratory organs, the pharynx, the larynx, but it does not go in the trachea. It goes down the esophagus into the stomach. Then we have the small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus, okay? So we've also got some accessory organs here. We have teeth, tongue, salivary glands. Liver is considered an accessory organ for some reason. I mean, this is a major organ. gallbladder, and again, the pancreas. Remember, the pancreas, the primary function of the pancreas is exocrine. All those acinar cells that we saw are exocrine. Okay, they make digestive enzymes. The only thing that's endocrine in the pancreas is the islets of Langerhans. The islets. Okay? And yes, there was a pancreas in the last lab exam. Okay? The digestive tract is open to the environment in both ends. We've talked about how that is important and how we have the MALT, mucosa associated lymphatic tissue, that is all along this track, okay, to hopefully catch things that are not supposed to be there. And then when we get into the small intestine, we'll have the Peyer's patch, okay? And we have the bacteria in the colon, okay? Not only do they make things for us, okay, but they actually help protect us. Some of them can actually make their own antibiotics, okay? Getting rid of any pathogens that may create a problem. Okay, but we'll talk more about those guys in a little bit. So the walls of this long muscular tube, we've got a mucosa, a submucosa, the muscular part, and the serosa. The middle of it is the lumen. And that lumen we saw when we looked for the MALT, okay? That has the finger-like projection, okay? So the mucosa, we've got the mucous membrane, hence we can have the MALT in here. Okay, this is simple columnar epithelium, okay? Any place where you're gonna have a lot of abrasion, such as up in the oral cavity, or the esophagus, or when you get down into the anal canal, okay? Where you have big boluses of things, food, big blobs of food, potentially being abrasive. You're gonna have that stratified squamous, okay? But the rest of it, where there's not a lot of abrasion, where it's already been chomped up, then you go into the columnar, because what's the whole point of columnar? Surface area, absorption, okay? Gives you more surface area to be able to bring things into that cell, okay? And then into the bloodstream, okay? Again, we have the MALT throughout here. And in the lab, we have the duodenum slides, and we'll have the duodenum slides next week, where we looked at the MALT, okay? Which happened to also be on the lab exam, okay? Okay, submucosa, this is a thick layer of a loose connective tissue, because this is where your blood vessels, your nerves, all that stuff is. You also have a lot of secreting glands that we saw when we drew some of this last, one of the last labs. And then obviously the MALT, okay, is down underneath the epithelium. The muscle, okay, the smooth muscle layer, okay. And then we have a couple different layers of this, because we're gonna talk about how we propel food down here, but it's squeezed as it goes down. So you have different directions of smooth muscle in here. Okay, longitudinal layer and your circular layer, okay? And then you have the serosa, simple squamous, okay, which is going to connect it to everything else, okay? All right, and then the fibrous connective tissue, again, really binds everything, to all the organs together. All right, so when we look at, again, the, this is probably the jejunum, looks like the jejunum, but you've got the finger-like projections here. All along these finger-like projections is simple columnar epithelium. Then you would have the submucosa down here where you have all your glands. This is also where the MALT sits. And then you've got the smooth muscle layer down here, and then the covering. Again, remember, this is a circle. This is a tube. And you saw in the video those finger-like projections, okay? Now we also, if you open up somebody's abdomen, okay, we also have a lining, okay, the peritoneum, which we learned about last week. when we can use that for dialysis, okay? But you've got all of this tubing down here. Okay, you've got the large intestine going out and around, all this stuff that sits inside the large intestine. So this would be the large intestine here. This is all the small intestine, okay? Now there's so much tubular stuff in here, okay? And one of the really bad things that can happen to you is if that gets twisted and blood supply gets cut off, okay? Because if blood supply gets cut off to any of this, everything past that cutoff is gonna die, okay? So we need to make sure that this stays where it's supposed to, this stays where it's supposed to, and so how do we do that? We have what's called mesenteries, okay? We have two of them. We have a lesser omentum and a greater omentum, okay? The lesser omentum hangs from the top part of the stomach and hangs it to the liver to keep the stomach where it's supposed to be. The other one looks like a apron, and so this would be what it would look like if it was down. And if you pick it up, everything else is underneath it, okay? Now what's important here is see all these little red and blue lines? You can't see the green lines in yellow, but this is also, not only is this kind of holding everything in place, and you can see it really here, the mesentery, the red and blue here, but you can see all the little lines through here. Not only does it keep the organs where they're supposed to, here's the mesentery of the small intestine, okay, here's the mesentery of the large intestine back here, okay. The lesser omentum keeps this in place, this keeps everything else in place, this is the greater omentum. And you can see all the blood vessels. So it's not just the intestines we're worried about, but we don't want the blood vessels getting tangled up, okay. So all of these mesenteries are very, very important, okay. We have one model in the lab that shows half of this, okay? I would suggest you look him up, or her up, I don't know what it is, okay? And you can see what this is. We don't have this on any of the lab models, okay? But you do want to see what that greater omentum looks like, okay? This is what it looks like on a cadaver. Okay, it looks like an apron, and you just can pick it up and then look at the intestines. Okay, but again, it plays a very, very important role. Okay, the lesser omentum again hangs from, this is the stomach, hangs from here and connects this to the liver, and then the greater omentum hangs from the bottom. So this is the greater omentum, it hangs from the bottom of the stomach, really. You've got the gallbladder, you've got the liver up here. Okay. So again, you've got the mesentery here and the mesentery here. Okay. Some people will call, I just call them the mesenteries of the large colon, but the mesocolon is basically the name of that. Okay. And again, the mesenteries. This is the mesenteries within the small intestine. Okay. And then we have the peritoneum, which is the covering. Okay, the abdominal cavity. Okay. Things that are inside, things that are outside. Okay, the kidneys sit outside, so they're retro. Okay. Now we've got a lot of, obviously when things are moving down through the digestive tract, we do have neural control, obviously. Okay, reflexes in through here. I'm not going to quiz you on the neuro stuff because that's 241, but we're going to talk about the hormones, gastrin and secretin, and things like that. Okay, and you need to understand how the muscles move the food down. Okay, so you have a bunch of neurons throughout here. Okay, again, there is a part 2 of the digestive tract for the crash course. These crash courses are really good, okay? So, just saying, you might want to take a look at it, okay? So, again, the mouth is called the oral cavity or the buccal cavity, okay? Did you guys make buccal slides? 241? Yeah. Okay. We got to see your little cells, okay? So we have cheeks, lips, palate, and tongue in here, okay? Stratified squamous, why? A lot of abrasion, okay? So we do have a lot of keratinized area, especially where there's gonna be a lot of abrasion on our gums, our hard palate. Some of it is non-keratinized, where you have a soft palate, makes it soft, okay? Inside the cheeks and the lips, so you can actually chew on it, okay? Cheeks and lips, all right, cheeks and lips, okay? Go back and think about the muscles that we learned in 241. This is a sphincter. These are sphincter, okay? You know, your kissing sphincter. Okay. That's one of my quiz questions. Alright, okay, and then the lips and all that kind of stuff, okay? You've got hairless basically on the lips, the dermal papilla, okay, that allows blood vessels and nerves to come close to the surface. Okay, what is the dermal papilla? Do you remember that in skin? Remember that? What happens if your skin, your epidermis and dermis sit like this, and you run into the desk? Okay, remember this? Dermal papilla, epidermis, dermis, holds it together so that you don't slough your skin off every time you bump into, I'd be in trouble, okay? Every time you bump into something, okay? I also have big dogs, that would be really bad, okay? So with that dermal papilla, because you've got that up, you know, where they come together and meet, okay? You'll have kind of blood vessels also coming up there, and that makes the things red, okay? Vermilion makes it red, all right? Tongue, okay? Forget everything you learned about the tongue map in school. It's not true, okay? But it's kind of fun to think about. If you listen to Crash Course, I think he goes through the tongue map. Okay, it's yes.
Is the tongue map, is that like where you taste certain things?
Yeah.
Okay,
Salt,
gotcha. Okay.
yeah, sweet, yeah. Doesn't work. Okay. All right. So, but you do have the different parts of the tongue. I usually don't quiz you on the tongue. Okay, it's a big muscle. This isn't muscle class. That was too quick, in my opinion. Okay, intrinsic muscles, extrinsic muscles. Go back. Tonsils. We already went through the tonsils. Okay, immune system. Okay, we've got a soft palate and a bony palate. Again, hard and soft palate. Okay, go back and look at those. And tonsils. Okay, we already did the immune system. Okay, and then if you want to look at the pairs of muscular arches on the side of the oral cavity. Okay, but I don't usually quiz on this. What I do quiz on, because I have a really nice little bottle, is a tooth. Okay? Alright. So, when you talk about teeth, it's in mastication, this is chewing. Okay? I don't ask you how many adult teeth we have, and I don't ask you how many kids' teeth they have. Okay? But what I may ask you is the tooth parts. Okay? So what is the crown? What is the root? What is the pulp? Okay? Everything above here is the crown. Everything below that is the root. And anything that's inside is the pulp. Okay? The pulp, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, nerves. Okay? That's the pulp. Okay? So this picture is in your book. Okay? You should know it. Okay? What is dentine and what is enamel? Okay? Enamel is non-living, the hardened stuff on the top. Okay? It's this part. Okay? On the top of, so you've got the crown. Okay? You've got the crown. You've got the gum. You've got the root. You've got the red is the pulp. This is the enamel. Enamel is dead. Okay? It cannot regenerate itself. Okay? Enamel, on the other hand, is, or the dentine, sorry, enamel, dentine is the gold part. It's also the gold part on my tooth. Okay? This is the living stuff up here. Okay? And it can regenerate itself if needed. Okay, so it goes all the way down and around. Okay? So you need to know which one's alive and which one's dead. What's the crown, what's the pulp, what's the root, what's the dentin, what's the enamel. Okay? You also need to know what the cement is. Cementin. Okay? It covers the root, and on mine it's purple. On that one, not really quite sure what color that is. Kind of gray. Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't know what color that is, really. Okay. Gray. Okay. Something's gray. Mine's purple. Yay. Okay. So you want to look at this tooth. I will have him in lab. Okay. This is a fun tooth. Why? Because there's your cavities. Isn't that gross? Okay. And then you have a root canal. Okay. So the cementin can also regenerate if damaged. Okay. It's the cement that holds the tooth in. Okay. So you need to know that. The root canal, okay, is the space that where the pulp sits, basically. The occlusion means the meeting of your teeth when your mouth is shut. Okay? Again, how many baby teeth do you have? How many people still have their wisdom teeth? Yeah, if your mouth is big enough, you still have them. If your mouth isn't big enough, you probably lost them. Okay?
I guess so.
But it varies. I mean, my sister had to have hers out, which is really funny. Okay, I kept mine. Okay. So it just depends. But we have, baby teeth, adult teeth. I don't quiz you on that. Which ones? There's your wisdom teeth. Okay. If they cannot come up through the surface and get impacted and get infected, then obviously they need to come out. Okay, because they can actually affect the nearby bone. Okay, so the human mouth, we have lots and lots of microorganisms in here. Okay, the sticky residue on your teeth is called plaque. It's made up of bacteria and the sugars. Okay, bacteria metabolize sugars. Now remember, not all bacteria is bad. Okay, a lot of it helps, and we'll find this out when we get into the colon, but a lot of it helps us digest stuff. Okay, they release acids that dissolve a lot of stuff, but they also release minerals that will eat your enamel and dentin. That's when you start to get cavities. Okay, where it eats right through the tooth. Okay, and then if it eats down into and gets into the pulp, okay, or if you crack your tooth, you break your tooth, and you have the pulp now exposed to the air, what happens when nerves are exposed to the air?
Mhm.
Ouch. Okay, I can tell you right now. Okay, I broke my tooth on a nut. Okay, and when you, boy, I'll tell you, there's nothing worse. Well, okay, there's a lot of things worse, but it really hurts. Okay, so they go in and they clean out the pulp and then they fill it. And sometimes you lose the tooth, sometimes they cap it, depends on the situation. This one's kind of a gnarly one. Okay, so that is a root canal. Okay, if you end up with a this being exposed, then you just have to clean this out, get rid of the nerves, and then fill this. And sometimes they'll just take the top of the tooth out. A lot of times this tooth will die anyway, so they'll just take that off. Okay, all right. Gingivitis. Gingiva is your gum. Gingivitis, remember itis, inflammation of the gum. Anything that is going to get down into the destruction of the bone, you're going to get tooth loss, periodontal disease. Okay. Okay, mastication, chewing. Okay, so we have a lot of muscles that are associated with chewing. hopefully you went through some of these when you were in 241, the temporalis. What bone is the temporalis over top of?
Temporal.
Yeah, temporal, okay. So, and then you've got the paragoids, and you've got, you know, the big ones of the cheek and all of those. So you go through those, but I'm not gonna quiz you on which muscle goes where. Okay, hopefully you already learned that one. Okay, let's move on to stuff you haven't learned. Saliva moistens the mouth. This is where starch and fat digestion begins. This is also hopefully going to inhibit some of that bacterial growth, hopefully keeping your teeth fairly clean. Okay, dissolves molecules. Okay, but moistens food and binds it together into what we call a bolus. When that food leaves your mouth, it is called a bolus. B-O-L-U-S. Okay, you need to know that name, that term. Okay, the saliva is hypotonic. Okay, and you have a lot of enzymes in here. Most of the enzymes, or all of the enzymes, again, these are proteins, remember, okay? They are going to react in pH around 7, neutral, okay? Amylase, okay, this is starch. Lipase, these are fats, okay? You're gonna see lipases and amylases and proteases, ACEs, enzyme, okay, break that enzyme, okay? But we're also gonna see a lot of mucus. We saw mucus in our respiratory tract, which was very important. We're gonna see mucus in our digestive tract, that's very important, especially down to the stomach. Okay, lysozyme is another enzyme. This actually destroys bacterial cell walls, okay, which is great. And then our all wonderful IgA antibody that inhibits bacterial growth, that is in your saliva. And then we have some electrolytes also in here. Bicarb, you're gonna see sodium bicarb. This is our base when we need to change pHs or make it basic. You're gonna see a lot of sodium bicarb, okay? What is sodium bicarb if you're cooking?
Baking soda.
Baking soda, yeah. All right, so we've got salivary glands in here. Linguinal ones, labial ones, palatine ones, it sits next to the palatine tonsils, buccal glands, okay? We have this model in lab, okay? I never put him on the lab exam, just saying, okay? But I'm more interested in you knowing what is being produced in here, okay? What are the enzymes? Okay, because you know, you've got the parotid, you've got the sublingual, you've got the submandibular, so, you know. Okay, salivary glands, what do they look like under the microscope? They have a really kind of fun shape. I don't usually put them under the microscope for lab exams either, but they are fun to look at. They're a compound, tubular, with the acinar type configuration on the ends. So it looks sort of like flowers underneath the microscopes. Okay, but we do have serous glands in here. We also have mixed glands that will make mucus and serous. So you've got all kinds of different glands in here, which is why I don't put them on the microscope. Okay, if this was a histology class, maybe, but not. So you've got here, bolus, mass swallowed as a result of the saliva, the teeth chopping it up, binding the particles, what's left, into a very soft, slippery, hopefully easily swallowed pile of stuff. Okay, this is what's going down your throat, a bolus. Okay. All right, and where's it gonna go? Well, it's gonna come in the mouth, and we know we have the pharynx. Remember the pharynx here, okay? And then we've got the larynx. Remember the larynx, okay? Muscular funnel, okay? We do have constrictors in here, okay? We've got a couple different ones, the pharyngeal constrictors and the pharynx, pharyngeal constrictors. This is what's forcing the food down, okay? they are divided into middle, upper, middle, and lower, okay? Because some of them are skeletal muscles and some of them are not, okay? So the pharynx we already talked about, okay? This is both digestive and respiratory tracts. We have the three sections, the naso, the oral, and the one down near the larynx, okay? And then the pharynx, again, the constrictors, middle, upper, middle, and lower, okay? These are sphincters, okay? Then we're going to go down into, instead of the trachea, we're gonna have the epiglottis flop it around, and we're gonna have the food hopefully go down the other tube, okay? The esophagus, okay? This is stratified squamous epithelium because there's a lot of abrasion because you got a big bolus of food particles coming down, okay? So you do have, once it penetrates and goes down it goes down through the diaphragm, there's an opening there, the esophageal hiatus, okay? And it meets the stomach at the upper part of the stomach called the cardiac orifice, okay? It's called the cardiac orifice because it's the closest part of the stomach that's closest to the heart. Huh? It's not close to the heart, but okay. Okay? It's the closest part of the stomach to the heart, so it's a cardiac orifice. Okay? Now, we're coming down this big tube, and at the top of the tube, at the top of the stomach, you have a sphincter. Okay, you saw this in the movie. The lower esophagus sphincter. The lower esophageal sphincter. This is important because it keeps all the acid hopefully in the stomach and not getting up on the esophagus. If it gets up on the esophagus, you're gonna feel it. Okay? Heartburn. It's acid up on your esophagus. Okay? Hopefully that stays closed when you've got a lot of churning going on, you're not splashing stuff up on your esophagus. Okay? So this lower esophageal sphincter is very important. Okay? We've got 22 muscles, start memorizing. Okay? Again, that's 241. Okay? We have 22 muscles in the mouth, pharynx, and esophagus. That's pushing things down. Okay? Come back to what's the most important part of your brain for physiological activity. Okay? That's where your swallowing center is, as well as your breathing center and all the other stuff you need, right? Okay? So it communicates with the muscles in the pharynx and the esophagus and all the faces, okay, and all the nerves, okay, and it's going to coordinate your movement of that bolus down, okay? Now, this is the part that you need to know, not so much what the muscles, which muscles there are, okay, but the phases and how this works, okay? So we have a oral phase. Where do you think that's at? Okay, so voluntary, right? Because you're thinking about it, you're chewing things up, okay? The oral phase, the tongue is up there, your food is accumulating, okay? The front of the epiglottis, okay? So this is under voluntary control, okay? So that soft mass of food, the bolus, is going to go down when that epiglottis tips back and the food slides down, okay? So when it's large enough, again, the epiglottis tips backwards, bolus slides around it and into the pharynx. Okay? Now we have, it's in the pharynx. So what do you think this phase is called? The pharyngeal phase. Okay, the pharynx phase. Pharyngeal phase, this is involuntary. Okay? So you've got food that's going down, entering. Okay, breathing is suspended during this point. Okay, as this is going down, you're not breathing. Why do you think that is? Yeah, you don't want it to go into the trachea. Okay, so that's shut off, hopefully. Okay, if it's not, then you're going to know it fairly quickly. Okay, those vocal cords are going to close that airway. We don't want the food in the water to go down that way. Okay, and the esophagus is going to open up, and that food bolus is gonna be thrown down, hopefully down into the esophagus, okay, with those pharyngeal constrictors, okay? Now we have it down into the esophagus. What's the next phase called? There you go, yeah. So we have the oral, where's that at? We have the pharyngeal, and we have the esophageal. Okay, so it's not that hard. Again, this one also is involuntary, muscle contractions, okay? When standing or sitting upright, gravity is going to help, which is why they say after a big meal, don't lay flat down, sit up, okay? It helps push that food down, okay? This is a problem for our astronauts, though. Okay? We've got the movement of this food is called peristalsis, okay? And you have, those are the 22 muscles that you're going down with the sphincters, and you're going to open, squeeze, open, squeeze, open, squeeze, okay? So the food gets pushed down, okay? That's called peristalsis. And again, it's controlled by, thank you, yeah, the medulla oblongata, okay? Now we're gonna get into the stomach. Stomachs are really funky looking organs, you know? Here is your esophagus coming down here. You've got a sphincter. This one you really can't see. You can see a little bit of the sphincter right there, okay? This is the part that's up near the heart. The heart's way up here. That's okay. I don't know who named that. Okay, but you've got the sphincter. And what's that sphincter called? The lower esophageal sphincter, okay? This is gonna keep all of the acid and everything down in here. The stomach is primarily a storage organ. There's very little absorption that cuts. There are some drugs that can go out, okay? And alcohol can go out if your stomach is empty, okay? So if you're going on a big drinking binge, eat dinner first, okay? Okay? So this is basically, all this is gonna do is gonna take the bolus down, okay, and it's gonna churn up all the food, okay? Because when it's gonna go out the other end into the small intestine, the small intestine's primary function is, again, more digestion in the first part of the small intestine, but absorption, okay? It's not happening in the stomach, okay? But we need to make it really liquefied because we're going to increase the surface area as much as we can. And then we're gonna squirt it into the small intestine. It's not gonna all go at the same time. It's gonna be squirted. Why would we squirt it instead of all going at the same time? Increase surface area, yes. Okay, so you have a big blob and you just take a little bit and you take a little bit, you've got more surface area for the digestive enzymes to work, okay? So the processed food, once it leaves the stomach, is now called chyme. Okay, another word to know, okay? Okay, so we have, this is the stomach in book, okay? We have 4 regions, the cardiac, the fundae, the body, and the pyloric. The cardiac is up near the heart, you got the fundic in the body, and the other important one is the pyloric, because it's down here, the bottom. This is the pyloric region. And the reason why that one's important is because it's right before you get to the small intestine, okay? It's the last part of the stomach, and then you're going to lead into the small intestine. What do you think is in between those two? A sphincter, okay? What do you think it's called? Pyloric sphincter, yes. That's why you need to know the pyloric region, okay? So you've got a sphincter up here, and you've got a sphincter at the other end of the stomach. One at the top, one at the bottom. Those make great quiz and lab exam questions. Okay? So, basically know the parts of the stomach, but I won't say what part of the stomach is this, but it's the cardiac, and you can find that. But you need to know the pyloric because that's where the other sphincter is. Okay? Okay? The pyloric. Okay? And that makes up the primary part. The whole bottom part is the pyloric. Okay? The pyloric region. Okay? Again, the pyloric sphincter. If you want, you can also call it the gastro, which means stomach, duodenum, sphincter. But you know what, I have a hard time remembering how to spell that, so I usually go with pyloric sphincter, just so. Okay, I'm a really bad speller too, okay? So this is going to regulate the amount of chyme that is going to be pushed into that first part of the small intestine, which is the duodenum. Okay, so this sphincter keeps it closed so you don't get the acids and stuff up on the esophagus. This one regulates the chyme into the intestine. Okay, very important. Okay, we do have different layers of the stomach. We're going to talk about these. Okay, but this muscle here is again in different directions. Okay, why? Because it's like the heart, it doesn't do this. Okay, the heart does this, right? Okay, the stomach does this. Why? What do you get out of this? What do you get out of this? Yeah. So it's got lots of different directions. We got longitudinal, circular, what's oblique? Diagonal, right? Okay, so it has lots of, it's 3 muscle layers, all in different directions. And what is rugae? Wrinkles. Okay, we have rugae in the bladder, okay, and we have rugae in the stomach. Okay, why? Stretch. Yeah. Okay, they go away when you stretch it, and then when you bring it back together, it's all wrinkled. Okay, it's just to allow this to stretch. Okay, so you have gastric rugae. Okay, wrinkles. Okay, so when this just like the bladder, when it's full, there are no wrinkles. Okay, and then it's like, you know, it deflates. Okay, now the stomach is made up of what we call gastric pits. So this is the top of the stomach. We've got these holes in this here. Okay, now there are some very important cells in here, and you need to know what they are. Okay, so the cells that are down here are the ones that are near the blood supply. So you're going to have the stem cells down in this area. And as they produce, they push these cells all up and out they go. And they become part of the chyme. Okay? Why would we do that? Well, the acid level is so high in the stomach, it's actually 0.8, not 2, it's 0.8, okay? The acidity is so high that these cells are exposed to really high acid. So they die after time. So we just make new ones, and the new ones push the old ones up and out, and they're gone. Okay, so we are constantly replacing these cells. Okay, so they divide and reproduce constantly. Okay, replacing them from the bottom of the pit upward. Okay, we also have a lot of glands in here. We're going to come back to mucus. Mucus is a very important part of the stomach. Okay, lots of glands down here, gastric, those that are in the pylorus, lots of them throughout the stomach, lots of different cell types. Now the cells that I'm really interested in you knowing, obviously we have stem cells at the bottom. These are the regenerative cells. Okay, they continually produce new cells. We have mucus cells. What are they called? Who makes mucus? Goblet cells. Okay. The regenerative cells, these are the stem cells. And then we have the parietal cells. These guys produce hydrochloric acid. Okay, there's your acid producers. They also produce intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is the only irreplaceable function of the stomach. Intrinsic factor allows for vitamin B12 to be absorbed. We need vitamin B12 to make hemoglobin. If we don't have vitamin B12, we are in trouble. Okay? So, the parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor. These guys are very important. You need that intrinsic factor. That's important. You can do without the acid, but you need this. Okay, they also produce a hormone called ghrelin. Okay, and this tells you actually when you're hungry, not hungry, all that kind of stuff. It talks to the hypothalamus. Okay, ghrelin actually was identified by a researcher up in University of Washington years ago. Okay, and when Dave Cummings identified this, we looked at this. I worked with Dave on the immune system response to this, but when they identified this, they thought, oh, we'll just make a blocker for that, and it'll be a great diet drug. Well, you block that, and everything else takes over, so it didn't work. Okay, but he identified ghrelin. Okay, then we also have the chief cells. Okay, these are the most numerous of the cells, and they secrete lipase. What does lipase do? Breaks up lipids. Okay, pepsinogen, this is a precursor to pepsin. What's pepsin do? What's it break up? Protein. Okay, and then we have some enteroendocrine cells. These are the ones that don't know what they want to do. Okay, they are basically endocrine cells. Okay, but they also are nervous system cells. So they make what we call the gut-brain peptides, intrinsic factor, histamine, gastrin, a number of different hormones. Okay. But what you need to know are the chief cells, the regenerative cells, and the parietal cells. Okay, chief cells, gastric lipase, pepsinogen. Okay, we've got the hydrochloric acid by the parietal cells. Okay, hydrochloric acid activates the pepsinogen into pepsin. Okay, it also helps to convert dietary iron. Okay, into the form that we can use. Okay, and a lot of this acid and a lot of these enzymes are going to break up connective tissue, plant cells, and hopefully destroy ingested pathogens. Remember, if you cough or sneeze, okay, you can either spew it out to your neighbor or you can swallow it. If you're swallowing it, it's probably full of pathogens. So all of this is going to hopefully destroy the pathogens. Okay, but if not, then we've got all the molds. Okay, we'll get there. Okay, so the hydrochloric acid activates the pepsin and the lipase. Okay, which is going to break up connective tissues, plant cells, that food, and it's going to change the ferric ions into ferrous ions, which is what we can absorb. Okay. Again, these are not specific for bacterial proteins or plant proteins, so we need to regulate them. Okay? Digestive enzymes are usually secreted in inactive forms, which is another reason why we're going to regulate these. Okay? pH is very important because these are proteins. You get a protein out of its pH range, and what happens to it? Denatures, right? Okay. So you also have zymogens, or just what they're called if they're in inactive form. Okay, pepsinogen secreted by the chief cells and activated by the hydrochloric acid. Pepsin digests, hopefully, dietary proteins and not yours. Okay. All right. So again, the intrinsic factor. This is a glycoprotein secreted by the parietal cells. It's essential in absorption of the vitamin B12 by the small intestine. If you don't have it, you don't make hemoglobin. Okay? Only irreplaceable function of the stomach. Okay? Vitamin B12 is needed to synthesize hemoglobin. If not, you're going to get anemia. Secretion of the intrinsic factor is the only indispensable function of the stomach. That makes a great quiz question. Okay? Okay, so the gastric mobility, all of these contractions, are controlled by what we call pacemaker cells. They are in the muscular part, okay? And they kind of work on their own. They churn the food, mix it up with the juices, and then move it along, okay? when you have vomiting, it's a forceful ejection of the stomach, and sometimes the intestinal contents, the duodenum, the chyme, that's why it comes up, and it kind of burns when you vomit. Got acid in there, okay? Vomiting is induced, in some cases, overstretching the stomach or the first part of the small intestine, some chemical irritants, some kind of visceral trauma, okay? Or your brain can't figure out there's a problem, say, with your pancreas, and you can't figure out what's going on, so it'll make you nauseous, okay? It's for you to clue in that there's something wrong, okay? Intense pain, okay? So a lot of times the brain doesn't know exactly what's going on, okay? Wrenching, okay? That's the thoracic expansion, the abdominal contents, okay? And then projectile vomiting. No, this is what babies do when they're on your shoulder, okay? And it's basically because they're all filled up and you didn't realize they overate. Okay, chronic vomiting. We'll talk about this, especially when we get into nutrition next week, when we talk about some of these eating disorders, because it's very dangerous to do a lot of vomiting, and when you want to keep from gaining weight, you will cause yourself to vomit, but you're going to get electrolyte imbalances, acid-base imbalances, you're going to erode your teeth, your esophagus, your pharynx, your larynx, all those, because acid's gonna come up. Right on onto those things, okay? So it's very, we'll talk about all the organ systems that something like anorexia produces. So how does the stomach protect itself from all of this acid? You've got 3 ways. Very tight junctions between those cells, so things don't leak down through it, okay? We have that epithelial cellular replacement that I talked about from the bottom of the pits up. The ones at the top get put into the chyme and they go away, okay? And then we have a lot of mucus in here, okay? Because mucus is alkaline, it's basic, okay? It keeps that acid from eating up your cells, okay? The acid and enzyme. Breakdown of any of these things, you're gonna get inflammation, the establishment of bacteria, and what we call a peptic ulcer, okay? All right. Oh, I don't have a picture. Oh, I guess I have a picture of a peptic ulcer later. Where is the ulcer? Oh, well, we'll have to come back. All right. Oops. I froze the computer. Watch for that. Where's it at? All right. Well, we'll go back. All right. Oops. Going the wrong way. I don't know. All right. Okay. So we're going to go down into the liver, okay? And this is that big organ, you need to know what it is and where it sits, okay? The small intestine is gonna receive secretions from the liver and the pancreas. Remember, the pancreas makes primarily digestive enzymes, and the liver does well over 500 functions, okay? And we'll talk about this. But the liver, on the bottom side of the liver, is that little green thing, and that is the gallbladder, okay? The gallbladder is nothing more than a storage organ. It stores the bile that is made by the liver, okay? So the liver, again, the biggest thing, variety of functions, and we've got a plastic model in the lab of this liver, and it's made into what we call lobes. They look like cylinders. Okay? All these really funky shaped cells, those are hepatocytes, and those are what do over 500 different functions. Okay? So we'll stop here with the liver. We'll do this on Wednesday. Okay? We've got the lab tomorrow and Thursday. Okay? Now, if you want to stay and go over the lab exam, that is fine. I will pass out the answer sheets. If you don't want to stay, that is fine too. If you leave with your answer sheet, you get a 0. Okay? So you do not leave with your answer sheet.